Hello and welcome to the Whitney Houston story, the first talking book about her. It was written and researched by Harry Drysdale Wood. Music is by Amanda Thompson and it is read by Sarah Phyllis.
I still don't think that I have reached my great voice potential.
When we think of great female pop and soul singers over the last 40 years, inevitably names such as Gladys Knight, Roberta Flack and Aretha Franklin are the first to enter our minds. These women, and many others besides, have led the way for subsequent generations of solo artists to display their vocal prowess on a global stage. Over the past 2 decades, music lovers have been blessed with performers like Celine Dion, Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson and Madonna, all of whom have enjoyed astonishing worldwide success. But one artist in particular has continued the legacy in true record-breaking style. She has combined grace with soulful intensity, surpassing the achievements of virtually all her predecessors to firmly cement her place in musical history.
If you are an entertainer and a performer, then it is necessary for a performer who is any kind of performer to reach the people, to feel them, to touch them, so they could, it's a give-take thing,
Whitney Elizabeth Houston was born on August 9, 1963 in Newark, New Jersey, to parents John and Cissy Houston. She is the youngest of 3 children with 2 elder brothers, Gary and Michael. Whitney was born into a family that was already notorious for its musical prowess. Her mother Cissy sang backing vocals for some of America's greatest soul singers, while her aunt, Dionne Warwick, and her godmother, Aretha Franklin, have both become legends in their own right. From the word go, music was a major influence in Whitney's life. As a small child, she would accompany her mother to the studio and experience the energy and emotion of a recording session. Watching her perform made quite an impression on Whitney, who was soon eager to have a go herself. By the age of 8, she had sung her first solo before a public audience with her mother's New Baptist Church choir. Her performance was so moving that as the congregation stood up to applaud, many had tears in their eyes. Her next big opportunity came when she was 14, singing Tomorrow from the musical Annie at the New York Town Hall. Again, her talents were greeted with a rapturous ovation. Cissy was now aware that her daughter had all the credentials to become a fine vocal performer. She was also aware, however, that there were no guarantees in the music industry, and that Whitney must first concentrate on her education. But despite the advice of her mother, by the time she had turned 15, Whitney was a regular around the studio singing backing vocals for soul legends such as Lou Rawls and Chaka Khan. It seemed that the dedicated life of a recording artist had started to appeal to her rather earlier than Cissy had hoped. Like many teenagers, Whitney began to develop a rebellious streak. She began to lose interest in her studies amid the growing belief that, like her mother, her destiny lay in music. At 16, however, a new and exciting career option was bestowed upon her, that of modelling. Whitney was soon working for New York's prestigious Click agency, and by the age of 17, she was appearing on the cover of popular magazines such as Cosmopolitan and Glamour. She also had a lucrative contract with cosmetics company Revlon. During this period, Whitney was earning around $5,000 a day for just 2 hours' work. Despite the huge amounts of money she was earning, Miss Houston soon realised that the life of a model wasn't for her. She felt that she had more to offer the world than just her looks. This change of heart came as good news to Cissy, who had never been supportive of what she saw as a degrading profession. During this period, Whitney signed a management contract with Gene Harvey and Seymour Flicks. Over the forthcoming years, the pair would prove vital in nurturing her talent and helping her to make the right decisions. Whilst working as a model, Whitney had also been taking acting lessons. She was ambitious to explore all aspects of the entertainment medium and found that acting helped her singing performances, allowing her to be more convincing on stage. As a result of the lessons, she managed to land a couple of minor roles in the American shows Gimme a Break and Silver Spoons. But it was Whitney's vocal talents that were drawing the most attention. Ever since 1979, when at 15 she sang the lead vocal for the Michael Zagar Band's hit Life's a Party, record companies had been eyeing her potential. As she matured into her late teens, this level of interest increased. Her management, however, realised the importance of allowing their protégé to develop naturally and was careful to ensure she didn't commit to anything she might regret. In 1983, a representative of Arista Records organised for Whitney to audition before the company president, Clive Davis. Clive agreed that she indeed had phenomenal talent, but would need nurturing into the spotlight. Arista Records signed Whitney and began looking for producers and songwriters to begin work on her first album. She made her live debut at the Sweetwater's Club in New York City. One of the songs that Whitney performed when she auditioned for Clive Davis was The Greatest Love of All, written by Michael Massa. By chance, Massa arrived at the Sweetwater's Club just as she was singing his song. He was simply astounded by the power and emotion of her version. The first show was a huge success. Everyone in attendance knew they had just witnessed a star of the future.
And they have always made it very important to let me know that, they can tell you they love you, they can tell you you're wonderful, they can tell you you're great, but mommy and daddy are going to tell you the truth, and we love you because you're ours. We love you not because you're Whitney Houston, you're famous.
Whitney's first album was released in the latter half of 1985. Entitled Whitney Houston, the record was received to huge public and critical acclaim. It sold more than 18 million copies, heralding a string of #1 singles both in the US and in the UK. The debut single from the album was a track called You Give Me Good Love. Although it reached #3 on the Billboard Hot 100, the song was intended as an introduction for Whitney into the black R&B marketplace. The decision to initially target this market was made amid fears that the soul and R&B audience might resent a black artist who only seemed interested in succeeding with the more mainstream pop charts. Clive Davis wanted to ensure that You Give Me Good Love was first and foremost a black hit. The rest, he assumed, would follow. The next two singles, Saving All My Love for You and How Will I Know, shot straight to #1 in the top 100. Saving All My Love also gave Whitney her first success across the Atlantic when it climbed to #5 in the British charts. How Will I Know was written by George Merrill, Shannon Rubicon and Narada Michael Warden, but was intended to be a hit for Janet Jackson. To the astonishment of the writers, Janet Jackson's management rejected the song as unsuitable material. A copy of the track eventually fell into the lap of Jerry Griffith of Arista, who believed it would be ideal for inclusion on Whitney's first album. The only problem was that none of the writers had ever heard of Whitney Houston and were reluctant to allow her to record the song. But with some perseverance from Griffith, they finally agreed. To begin with, Warden, Merrill and Rubicon had doubted Whitney's ability to do the song justice. All were apparently stunned by the quality of the finished product. Saving All My Love for You was also written by Michael Massa. He had already heard Whitney perform The Greatest Love and believed fully in her capacity to perform his latest number. Soon after the chart-topping success of this track, Whitney forced herself into the record books by becoming the first ever female solo artist to have 3 consecutive #1s off a debut album, when The Greatest Love of All, once released as a single, hit the US top spot as well. Whitney's first album had been such a phenomenal success that it seemed almost inevitable that the second album, entitled Whitney, would rocket straight to the #1 position during its first week of release in the US. again history had been made. It was the first time that an album by a female solo artist had entered the charts at number 1. Due to the success of How Will I Know from the first album, the songwriting talents of George Merrill and Shannon Rubicam were once again enlisted. The pair collaborated on one of the highlights of the Whitney album, the hit I Wanna Dance With Somebody. Again, the song flew up the charts, and for a 4th consecutive time, a Whitney Houston single occupied the number 1 position. 4 number 1s quickly became 5, following the release of Didn't We Almost Have It All? British listeners, however, were not quite so receptive to her latest effort. It failed to break into the top 10, the first time in 5 that this had happened. Indeed, the media reaction to the whole of the second album was generally less complimentary than that of the first. It was condemned for being too similar, for simply trying to rework a steadfast formula rather than move in a new direction. Such accusations do seem a little unfair when you consider that millions of listeners were eagerly waiting for more of the same. By April of 1998, Whitney stood alone in Billboard chart history by gaining a 7th consecutive US number 1 hit with Where Do Broken Hearts Go? Even the most hardened cynics could not deny her this moment of glory. Her achievements seem even more astonishing when you recognise that during the height of Beatlemania, the Fab Four only managed 6 back-to-back chart toppers. Another of the album's highlights was a duet featuring mother and daughter on the song I Know Him So Well, a ballad taken from the 1980s musical Chess. This song had already been immortalised by Barbara Dickson and Elaine Paige in 1984, when it occupied the British top spot for 4 weeks. Whitney's version was never released as a single. Instead, it served as an appropriate finale to a period of success that had been beyond her wildest dreams. After 2 number 1 albums, 7 chart-topping singles, and the endless demands of tours and promotions, Whitney took time out to relax and reflect. She moved into a newly built house in Medham, New Jersey, and enjoyed a period of relative sanctuary away from the prying eyes of the media. During the release of her second album and the months that followed, it was only the press that prevented Whitney's life from reaching perfection. One of the most popular jibes was that her music was too white. It was an accusation that hurt her a great deal, and one that she didn't feel that she could simply take in her stride. In her defence, she denounced the entire concept of either black or white music, insisting that it is a universal art form to be enjoyed by all colours and creeds.
I've gone left, I've gone right. When I think I know what I'm doing, and I always come back center. I always come back home to God and say, I'm sorry, I went there. But I thought I could manage it myself, but I can't. And he goes, I told you, come back to me, I'll help you out.
It would be a 2.5-year wait before Whitney released her third album, I'm Your Baby Tonight. She was not, however, completely absent from the spotlight during this period. In September of 1988, the single One Moment in Time was released. Written to inspire the American Olympic team to victory at the forthcoming Games in Barcelona, One Moment was supported by a video that paid homage to the nation's sporting heroes. Predictably, the song became an immediate hit in the US. It also topped the charts in many other nations worldwide. A year later, Whitney recorded a duet with godmother Aretha Franklin. Despite the comparatively poor chart showing, It Isn't, It Wasn't, It Ain't Ever Gonna Be provided fans with a rare and historic treat as 2 of America's finest vocal powers joined forces. Having just served up a couple of the most successful albums of all time, the pressure was once again on Whitney to surpass herself. The production team of L.A. Reid and Babyface were introduced in order to provide a fresh influence. Whitney and her team harbour concerns that more of the same may now not be totally acceptable. Whilst recognising the need to maintain the distinctive flavour of her previous work, Clive Davis wanted to avoid further criticism regarding the similarities in the albums. When the media heard that Whitney would be working with LA and Babyface, they went straight for the jugular. The duo were notorious for their work with soul and R&B artists. Whitney was therefore accused of attempting to gain favour with black radio stations by working with them. Again, she responded by dismissing any need to musically accommodate separate black and white audiences. The most notable song on the album was, of course, the title track. Written by Reed and Babyface, I'm Your Baby Tonight topped the American singles chart for 7 weeks, giving Whitney an unprecedented 8th number 1. Before playing the song to Whitney, the writing team were not sure if the track would even make it onto the album, never mind achieve the success it did. The vocal performance, however, soon injected new life into it and soulfully characterised it into a true Whitney Houston classic. The critical response to the album was to vary from utterly professional, crisp and catchy to unconvincing, soulless and childish. It would seem that much of the press was ready to condemn Whitney's latest effort, regardless of the standard. This was an attitude that she was fully aware of, but the only response of any importance to her was that of the public. This again was mixed. I'm Your Baby Tonight failed to compete with her previous attempts in terms of record sales. The majority of her fans, however, fully appreciated the transitional nature of the album and respected her artistry. Whitney planned to follow the release of this album with a world tour. If she couldn't win people over on record, then she would do it on stage. Unfortunately, due to the escalating conflict in the Middle East, this being during the Gulf War, and the imminent threat of terrorism, the tour was postponed. In the meantime, Whitney once again topped the American charts with a version of the Star-Spangled Banner. Part of the anthem was recorded live at the Super Bowl final in January of 1991, while the finishing touches were added later in the studio. America's involvement in the Gulf War undoubtedly influenced the sale of over 1 million copies. Due to popular demand, the single was also curiously released in the UK. The world tour eventually commenced in late August 91. Concert tickets sold like crazy, with eager fans willing to pay touts extortionate amounts of money for the chance to see their idol. The shows themselves were star-studded extravaganzas, supported by grand and imaginative staging. Those in attendance were treated to Whitney's dynamic delivery of her classic repertoire. She also took time to pay homage to her roots by instigating large-scale gospel sing-alongs. The majority of the press gave positive reviews, praising her for the professionalism and for the undeniable vocal prowess tirelessly displayed throughout the tour. Once the tour was over, Whitney once again retreated to her $15 million mansion in New Jersey. Purchased over 3 years before, she had not yet had the opportunity to properly move in. Whilst on tour, builders and interior designers worked long and hard to make her dream house exactly to her requirements. By the time Whitney threw her housewarming party, the mansion had been equipped to cater for every luxury you could imagine. An Olympic-sized swimming pool with the singer's initials tattooed proudly on the bottom lies within the acres of the majestic grounds. Whilst inside the building, a conveyor belt runs throughout the dining areas to ensure that fetching food and drinks becomes a thing of the past.
You know, me, I have a fire in me that can really get off, I'm gonna tell you. And I can really get you, man. If I get you, you got.
It was at the strange insistence of one of Hollywood's top actors that Whitney was given her first opportunity to star in a major motion picture. Writer and director Lawrence Kasdan wrote The Bodyguard in the 1970s as a romantic thriller that would hopefully star Steve McQueen and Diana Ross. Due to various complications, however, the pair were unable to team up, and Kasdan, although still firmly believing in the potential of his screenplay, moved on to other projects. The Bodyguard was not forgotten though. In his spare time, he continued to develop and refine the script until the time should come when he could make the film. In 1985, Kevin Costner was chosen to play a part in Kasdan's Wild West movie, Silverado. The two developed a good working relationship and soon began discussing other projects and scripts. It was here that Kasdan impressed Costner with his ideas for The Bodyguard. Costner suggested that they should begin work on the film as soon as possible. It would not be for another 5 years, however, that either Costner or Kasdan could commit themselves to the project. When in 1990 serious talks did once again recommence, Costner insisted that Whitney Houston would be as perfect a substitute for Diana Ross as he was for Steve McQueen. There have been plenty of occasions over the last few years when Whitney had been approached with offers to appear in movies. For one reason or another, however, she had always declined. Indeed, she was once again reluctant when she was asked to star in The Bodyguard. Costner was determined, however, that she should play the leading lady, and after more careful consideration, she accepted. If Whitney was ever going to launch an acting career, now was the time to do it. Her last album had shown a dip in her musical popularity, but following a hugely successful world tour, she had fully redeemed herself. It was the perfect time to move on and demonstrate that she possessed other talents. If nothing else, at least she knew that she could relate to the central character, rock star turned actress Rachel Marron. The change of artistic focus from music to film was a courageous one. To be the queen of one genre does not guarantee success in another. This aspect must have weighed heavily on Whitney's mind when she agreed to commit to The Bodyguard, and it must have been of some relief when the film's criticisms were aimed chiefly at the plot. Journalists enthused about the on-screen chemistry between Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston, and also of the extreme promise she had shown in her debut acting role. Despite the opinions of the critics, however, The Bodyguard was a box office smash, and by the end of 1992 it had grossed more than $200 million worldwide. The movie also rocked the UK film charts by becoming one of the top 5 biggest ever earners. It took £25 million in cinemas nationwide and accounted for 20% of all video rentals in its first week of release a year later. As well as Whitney's fans being treated to The Bodyguard motion picture, they could also listen to an accompanying soundtrack for which Whitney had contributed 6 new songs. When asked to select and rehearse material for the album, she looked for tracks that she thought Rachel would have herself chosen. The 2 most notorious selections, I'm Every Woman and I Will Always Love You, probably best reflect the strong yet sensitive nature of Rachel's character. I Will Always Love You, a Dolly Parton song, gave Whitney yet another #1 in both the US and the UK. For a brief moment it looked as if British pop history were going to be made when advance orders for I'm Every Woman registered at over 60,000. Whitney Houston was going to replace herself at #1 and become the first female artist ever to achieve this. Unfortunately, it did not quite happen this way. Whitney did, however, once again make the record books with the success of I Will Always Love You. The single occupied the American top spot for an unprecedented 14 weeks and became the biggest ever selling non-charity record in the US.
The respect of privacy. That's what I lost, and I swear to you, I wish I could get it back. I do.
One of the main drawbacks of achieving celebrity status is the continual media speculation concerning your personal affairs. Over the years, the press had romantically linked Whitney to the likes of Robert De Niro, Eddie Murphy and football star Randall Cunningham. When it eventually came to light that she was dating singer Bobby Brown, it served to end rumours regarding her sexuality. After seeing each other for around 2 years, Whitney and Bobby exchanged vows in the summer of 1992. Newspapers and magazines immediately began to cast doubt over the sincerity of their relationship. Many claimed that Bobby was simply trying to raise his profile by marrying Whitney, while others saw it as a smokescreen created by Whitney in order to hide the fact that she was, after all, gay. The truth of the matter was that the couple were very much in love and simply wanted to be left in peace. The needless cruelty that was dished out to the pair during this period seemed all the more wicked when Whitney revealed that she had a miscarriage in late 1991. Despite this traumatic event, she soon fulfilled her lifelong dream of starting a family. On the 4th of March 1993, in a private New York clinic, Whitney gave birth to a 6-pound, 2-ounce baby girl, soon to be christened Bobby Christina. In late 1993, the couple consummated their love and celebrated the birth of Bobby Christina by recording a duet called Something in Common. The title of the song could perhaps be seen as something of a dig at the media, who had always insisted that they in fact had nothing in common. The birth of Bobby Christina did not stop Whitney embarking upon another mammoth world tour. She was frequently joined on stage by her husband and baby, usually for the climactic "I Will Always Love You." The London leg of the tour culminated in a party at the Hard Rock Cafe, which was attended by over 150 people. Following the world tour, Whitney went into a creative lull while she concentrated on her family life. She re-emerged in the public eye in 1995, starring alongside Angela Bassett, Loretta Devine and Layla Roshan in the movie picture Waiting to Exhale. The critically acclaimed film earned more than $70 million at the box office and was accompanied by a soundtrack that would go on to sell more than 10 million copies worldwide. Whitney contributed 3 new tracks for the Waiting to Exhale album: Exhale, Shoop Shoop, Count on Me, a duet with CeCe Williams, and Why Does It Hurt So Bad? Always looking for ways to expand her creative repertoire, Whitney also co-produced the album. In 1996, Whitney fulfilled a lifelong dream when she released a pop gospel album for the film The Preacher's Wife. The soundtrack went on to be the biggest-selling gospel album in Billboard chart history. She sang the lead vocal on 14 of the 15 tracks, including the first single of the album, I Believe in You and Me. Cissy Houston sang on a reworking of the 23rd Psalm, The Lord is My Shepherd. The film The Preacher's Wife starred Whitney Houston, Denzel Washington and Courtney B. Vance. It was directed by Penny Marshall and released on December 13, 1996. Based on The Bishop's Wife, a classic 1947 movie starring Cary Grant and Loretta Young, The Preacher's Wife was praised by critics, with Whitney gaining respect from film pundits who doubted her ability to hold the screen alongside the likes of Washington. A year later, Whitney would grace the screen as the fairy godmother in a musical production of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. The show was made for television and was broadcast on November 2, 1997, to a US audience of more than 60 million. It was ABC's best Sunday night viewing figures for over 10 years. The production went on to win the Emmy Award for Outstanding Art Direction in a variety, musical or comedy special. When Cinderella was reproduced on video, it soon broke all previous records for sales within the made-for-TV genre.
I've done some great material, I've done some great work, and it's hard for me to listen to myself and say, oh yeah, you really sound good, you know what I'm saying? I am very critical of myself.
Throughout her career, Whitney's always worked very hard for various charities. In 1989, she set up the Whitney Houston Foundation for Children, which concentrates on many issues such as homelessness, poverty, and serious illness. During 1994, a percentage of the proceeds from her sellout South African concert contributed to helping the nation's younger generation. Her foundation has also worked with TV networks, organising special events to help raise funds for the charity. 1997 saw an HBO TV extravaganza contribute over $3,000 for the Children's Defence Fund. Every Christmas, the Whitney Foundation puts on a special party for the homeless kids of Newark and New Jersey. As well as running her own charity, Whitney also supports scores of other good causes worldwide. 1999 saw the release of Whitney's 4th album, My Love Is Your Love. It was her first non-soundtrack record in 8 years and has a more contemporary urban approach to previous material, proving that she is not just the queen of the ballad. The esteemed list of producers and songwriters who have worked on the album include Babyface, Wyclef Jean from the Fugees, and hip-hop star Missy Elliott. The funkier feel of My Love has meant that the blues and soul audiences have bought the album in their droves, but as always, Whitney is naturally defensive when approached on the issues of writing the material for any particular audience. The release of the new album has been supported by a highly successful world tour that began in Chicago in June 1999. Audiences have been treated to material spanning her entire career. Huge sellout crowds demonstrate that Whitney is still just as popular as ever, whilst critical reviews provide evidence that her performances are every bit as unforgettable. the My Love Is Your Love tour has again proved her skeptics wrong. She has reinvented herself once again and moved with the times in a way that no one could have predicted. Much has been said over the years, both good and bad, about the career of Whitney Houston. What is undeniable, however, is that the huge body of work that she has created will withstand the test of time and inspire future generations.
Thank you for buying the Whitney Houston story. We hope you enjoyed it. Watch out for further titles on Chrome Dreams coming up soon. If you did enjoy it or have any comments or suggestions, write to us at Chrome Dreams, PO Box 230, New Malden, Surrey, UK, KT3 6YY, and tell us so. We've got free copies of our next release for the best letters, so don't forget to include your name and address. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye for now.